What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Homebrew EDH. This is episode 52. Yes, I got the number right this time. This is Tivit, Seller of Secrets. This is a 3-color combo control deck that aims to use one of a few infinite combos, a small stacks package, and some disruption and all that good stuff to eventually grind out a win, either through commander damage, because a 6/6 flying with Ward 3 is pretty powerful even by itself, or again, any number of combos that I did stash inside the deck. So without further ado, let's get into the deck tech. Tivit, Seller of Secrets is 3 white, blue, black, so 3 in Esper for a 6/6 legendary Sphinx Rogue with flying and Ward 3, which means basically when an opponent targets it with a spell, that spell gets countered unless they pay 3 extra. Tivit has an ability that is Council's Dilemma, so whenever he enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, starting with us, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, investigate, which means make a clue token. For each bribery vote, we create a treasure token, and it also says when voting, you may vote an additional time. So generally, with most pods of 4, you'll end up with 3 clues and 2 treasures. Keep in mind that is 5 artifacts. That'll come into play later, if you can't tell already, with one of our combos, but that'll come up a little bit later in this video. The first segment for today is going to be that stacks/control package. This is more stacks aligned than anything else, but we have the One Ring, Smokestack, Rule of Law, Smothering Tithe, and Thorn of Amethyst. The One Ring is a recent card that came out, obviously, in the Lord of the Rings set from last year. 4 mana for a legendary artifact with Indestructible. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring, and it has the ability to tap, put a burden counter on the One Ring, and then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. Smokestack is 4 mana for an artifact that says during your upkeep, you may put a suit counter on Smokestack. During each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a permanent for each suit counter on Smokestack. So it says you may put a counter on it in your upkeep. So if you want to start attritioning out people and just denying them all kinds of stuff, you can. Or if you just want to keep it mildly inconvenient, you can do that as well. Rule of Law is pretty simple. 2 and a white for an enchantment that says each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn, which isn't too bad. Especially early game, it can help kind of slow everybody else down, give us time to get enough mana out to land Tivit and then start doing all the shenanigans with that. Smothering Tithe is a commander staple at this point. 3 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you make a treasure. And Thorn of Amethyst is 2 mana for an artifact. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. So just a slight hate bearer to get down there and try to control the board a little bit longer and delay maybe a little bit of interaction so we can land Tivit, get our combo pieces out, and do what needs doing. Next up is actually a small blink package, because Tivit has the enter the battlefield trigger to vote and generate those tokens as well, besides the combat damage. So with a little bit of blinking with Tivit out, that may actually be not a bad idea. Obviously not the main focus of the deck, but we still have a couple of good pieces. Lazelle's Acrobatics, which is 3 and a white for an instant, that says exile all non-token creatures you control, then roll a d20. If you roll 1 through 9, you return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. If you roll a 10 through 20, return those cards to the battlefield, and then exile them again, and then return them at the owner's control at the next end step. So basically, at 1 through 9, you get 1 blink at the end step. The 10 through 20, you get a 1 blink, and then a 2nd blink at the end step as well, which can be pretty good with Tivit out, among other things. Restoration Angel, 3 and a white for a angel with flash and flying. It's a 3/4. It says when it enters the battlefield, it may exile target non-angel creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. Tivit is a Sphinx Rogue, so no worries there. Gets blinked by the angel, throw the voting triggers up, and get your tokens. And then there is Yorion Sky Nomad, not the companion because it doesn't really work with Commander just due to the deck size restriction, but as the 99, it works just fine. 3 and 2 hybrid Azorius, so white or blue. Any combination thereof works for a 4/5 legendary Bird Serpent. Not going to go over the companion thing. I'll throw it up on screen if you really want to read it, but the deck restriction that says starting deck contains at least 20 more cards than the minimum deck size is not allowed in Commander, so that doesn't really work. But Yorion has flying and says when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-land permanents you own and control. Return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So again, another blink tool to flash Tivit out and back in, and just be able to get a little bit more value off of him. Alright, and the last section we're going to look at today is our combo pieces. The most notable one here is Time Seive, a blue and a black for an artifact that says tap, sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. Keep in mind that is 5 artifacts. That'll come into play later. That is our main win con with this deck. With Tivit, he enters, you make 5 tokens regardless of how your opponents vote, as long as you have 3 opponents, obviously, and yourself. You get the 5 tokens, sacrifice them to Time Seive, take an extra turn, you attack with Tivit or blink him in some way, do the same thing, generate your tokens, so on and so forth until, I guess, one of your opponents is dead, because then you won't get the 5, you'll just get the 4. Obviously, we'll have mana rocks and all that good stuff as well, so you can sacrifice those if you need to. If anybody's at like low life totals, maybe it's a little bit more feasible on that end. There are other ways to win in the deck, though. We have a Dramatic Reversal Isochron Scepter line that basically, if you imprint Dramatic Reversal on Isochron Scepter when you play it, and you have something as simple as a Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, you make infinite mana of all colors, and then you can use that to power potentially Staff of Domination, which I have there in the top middle section. You can either gain infinite life, you can draw your entire deck, all that good stuff, with the tap and untap abilities, having all the mana you could ever want. And the other way that I have to win, just as kind of a very last resort type deal, is Approach of the Second Sun. It's not a good win con, but it's there in case you need it. 6 and a white for a sorcery. If the spell was cast from your hand and you've cast another spell named Approach of the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach of the Second Sun into its owner's library, 7th from the top, and you gain 7 life. So again, not a great win con, but it is there if we need it, if we get that far into it. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. Consider subscribing. It does help support the channel, and it's free. You can always change your mind later. Full deck list is in the description as always. That's all I've got for today. I've got a couple more deck techs in the works as well, so stay tuned to find out what I've got brewing. Take care of yourselves, and until I see you again, have a good one.